Hi again. John Stott, in his commentary, The Spirit, the Church, and the World, the Message of Acts. He's reached chapter 25, Paul before Festus. According to Josephus, Felix was recalled to Rome in order to explain his savage suppression of a dispute between Jews and Syrians over their respective civil rights in Caesarea, and would have been severely punished but for his brother Pallas's appeal to Nero. Not much is known about Porcius Festus, who replaced him, for he died in office only 2 years later, but he seems to have been more just and moderate than either his predecessor or his successors. The new procurator lost no time in acquainting himself with Jewish affairs, including the case against Paul. Luke presents him to his readers as a brisk and energetic worker and summarizes his involvement in the case. A. He refused the Jewish leaders' request to be allowed to try Paul in Jerusalem. B. He heard Paul's defense and appealed to Caesar. And C. He consulted King Agrippa II as to what he should do next. Here's the section. Festus refuses the Jewish leaders' request. 3 days after arriving in the province, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem, where the chief priests and Jewish leaders appeared before him and presented the charges against Paul. They urgently requested Festus, as a favor to them, to have Paul transferred to Jerusalem, for they were preparing an ambush to kill him along the way. Festus answered, "Paul is being held at Caesarea, and I myself am going there soon. Let some of your leaders come with me and press charges against the man there, if he has done anything wrong." Although Festus was a more conciliatory character than Felix, yet on his first visit to Jerusalem he stood firm. In spite of the urgent pleas of the Jewish leaders to have Paul transferred to Jerusalem to be tried there, Festus refused. Had his suspicions been aroused that they had ulterior motives, even as Luke divulges that they were preparing an ambush to kill him? We do not know. What is apparent is that Festus was determined to allow justice to take its course. Roman procedure followed 3 stages. First, charges had to be formulated and sustained by the prosecutor. Secondly, there would be a proper formal act of accusation by the interested party. Thirdly, the case was heard by the holder of the imperium in person, in this case, the procurator. In this way, the accused and his accusers would come face to face. Festus hears Paul's defense and appeal to Caesar. This covers verses 6 to 12. After spending 8 or 10 days with them, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day he convened the court and ordered that Paul be brought before him. When Paul appeared, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many serious charges against him, which they could not prove. Then Paul made his defense. "I have done nothing wrong against the law of the Jews or against the temple or against Caesar." Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, "Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on these charges?" Paul answered, "I am now standing before Caesar's court, where I ought to be tried. I have not done anything wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know very well. If, however, I am guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar." After Festus had conferred with his council, he declared, "You have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you will go." Then Stott comments, Luke does not specify what the many serious charges were, but Paul's defense indicates that he was accused of offending in 3 ways, namely, against the Jewish law, the temple, and the emperor. Once again, religious and political charges were combined, but on this occasion, Caesar is mentioned for the first time. The disturbances which Paul was alleged to have caused were religious in their origin, but civil in their character. That is why Caesar's representatives were obliged to take note of them. The Jews knew that the Roman governors were unwilling to convict on purely religious charges, and therefore tried to give a political twist to the religious charge. And the prolongation of the trial was due to the fact that the charge was political, and yet the evidence was theological. It was this mention of Caesar which determined the course of Paul's trial before Festus. for some reason which is not apparent, except that he wished to do the Jews a favor. Festus gave Paul the option of being tried before him in Jerusalem. In making this offer, he was within his rights. Nothing prevented him from using the Sanhedrin, or members of it, as his own concilium. That is what Paul feared. Paul saw clearly that he could hope for justice and for acquittal only from the Romans, not from the Jews. He had committed no offense against the Jews, as Festus knew perfectly well. If he were guilty of a capital offense, he was willing to bear the penalty. But if the Jewish accusations were false, no one, not even the procurator, had the right to hand him over to them. So he had only one option left: I appeal to Caesar. Festus seems to have been quite unprepared for this development. What would he do now? He could neither convict and sentence Paul for fear of offending against Roman justice, nor release him for fear of offending the Jews. So after conferring with his concilium, his legal advisers, he realized that he had no alternative but to allow the prisoner's appeal to go forward. You have appealed to Caesar you will go. This was not the appellatio of a later period, which was an appeal to a higher court against sentence passed by a lower one, but rather the Roman citizen's ancient right of provocatio, or provocatio, which protected him from summary punishment, execution, or torture without trial, from private or public arrest, and from actual trial by magistrates outside Italy. If in his trial before Felix, Paul had emphasized the continuity of the way with Judaism, in his trial before Festus, he stressed his loyalty to Caesar. Caesar is mentioned 8 times in this chapter, 5 times as Caesar, twice as Sebastos, the Greek equivalent of Augustus, and once as ho Kyrios, that is, the Lord. Paul knew that he had not offended against Caesar, and that he stood in Caesar's court. It was only logical that he should exercise his citizen's right to appeal to Caesar. Next time, Paul asked Agrippa's advice. I'll put in a link to how God used the greatest Caesar, that is Augustus Caesar, to prepare the world for Christ. See you soon.